And this is just a picture of our solar installation. It's a typical Maryland barn with two slopes facing directly south. Actually, it's 179 degrees facing south. So we really have kind of an optimum situation. One slope is good for winter and one slope is good for summer. And this is what happened. We installed the system in the spring of 2018, and it took off kind of like gangbusters. And I remember that year was a dry year up until August, and then the rains came, and you can see the production fell off. 2019 started off and then went south. And 2020 never recovered. And so I began to worry, was there something wrong with my system? But all of a sudden, 2021 is generating more electricity than ever. And so I really tried to track down what is the cause of this particular variability. I just really wanted just to point out the differences between 2021 and 18 and what happened in those other 2 years. As a result, you can see that my system was designed to produce 29,500 kilowatt hours a year. And so I have had deficits in production in 2020 and 2019. But if you look at 2021 up until June, I've produced almost as much electricity this year as I did for the entire year last year. So moving on, I thought I would track down. I tried other things. I looked at droughts and the history of droughts and tried to figure some kind of a correlation. But the best I could do was to find a website from NOAA that actually looked at the fractional cloud cover. And as you can see from the right-hand side, when it's overcast, if you take a look at 2019, I should have taken the green off, but I couldn't do it. So we'll focus on the orange. The solid line 2019, you can see that as the fractional cloud cover increases, the production actually decreases, and so that's kind of a correlation over the year, although it's not strictly correlating. And one of the reasons is the way the fractional cloud cover is calculated. It's calculated on a daily, hourly basis by satellites. And sometimes the clouds could be at night and you could have a clear day. So it might register as being cloudy, but actually a pretty good day for solar production. This is typical of what the output of my solar system is. What is not, you can only concentrate on the shape of these graphs because you can't read the peaks. They've normalized the graphs so that they fit the screen. So the absolute numbers at the top of the graph are different. So only look at the shape. And the shape kind of indicates if you have a jagged shape, that means you got clouds, passing intermittently over you. If you have a beautifully smooth shape like the upper right hand, that's really a day where you really had 100% sun all day long and probably no clouds. One of the things that's hard to see on this graph is the time of day is changing between May and February, so that the solar production hours are significantly different in February versus May. So if you look at February, there was one day that I barely lit 200 watt, 300 watt light bulbs at the beginning there. But on the other hand, at the end of the week, there was actually a good day in February where it produced almost 100 kilowatts. Typically, what my system is producing right now is somewhere between 140 and 150 kilowatts on a very good day. I just put on the bottom there what the cloud cover was for those days, and you can kind of see they kind of correlate with what the cloud cover actually was. I think I would probably look for a different database and look. The problem with cloud cover is the satellite only sees the reflected light. It can't tell you how thick the clouds were or how much water vapor was in the cloud. So the transmittance, that is how much light actually gets through, can actually be quite different for different readings of cloud cover. So I may try to look at other kinds of data sets to see if there's a more strict correlation with clouds. I want to give you an example, and this example really will get to the rest of the talk. The Canary Islands has one of the highest concentrations of renewables in the world, and they are a strictly fossil fuel backup system for their renewables. So if you take a look at the curves in the upper left, you can see how much power they're using during the day. So these are our daily time frames that we're looking at. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're getting around 60% of their electricity from renewables, basically solar and wind. And so when you look at the blue line, which is the solar plus the wind, you see the hump, which is caused by the solar, but being the Canary Islands, the wind is fairly steady over the day, dying off a little bit at night. The big surprise is the graph in the upper right. They measure their daily CO2. And as the day goes on, the afternoons begin to show significant increases in CO2. And the reason is the conventional generation systems, you can't turn them on like a switch. In fact, some of them take hours to come up, some take minutes. Steam turbines, if you look down at the bottom, and that's kind of a cross-section of the daily thing, they really do not like to vary. So they generally have to run those at constant generation capacity, and they try to capture the heat, all right, to increase the efficiencies. But as you can see, all right, during the early morning and late at night, they have to bring on the fossil fuel, which is the diesel engines and the gas turbines. And you see they bring those on, all right, during the day. They take shorter times to start up, but those big diesel engines can take an hour or more, all right, to come up to producing electricity. Gas turbines are much better. And this is just for the Canary Islands. This is what their actual time frames are. It takes 285 minutes if the steam turbine is already hot, and another 46 minutes to ramp up to load. So you can see when the photovoltaics are dying and they have to start these other engines, they're starting these engines at the height of the day, all right, and as a result, they don't have any net decrease in CO2 In fact, they have a net increase in CO2. And that's the whole message, I think, that's lying behind this. And the rest of what I'm going to tell you is the problems of the grid plus the types of generation that we have are holding, all right, renewables back from actually producing a dent in CO2. In fact, data that I didn't put up, Germany has one of the highest concentrations of solar, but their CO2 production has not budged in 20 years. When they gave up nuclear power and tried to switch totally to renewables, the renewables still require the fossil fuel generators, all right, for backup. And as a consequence, they have been unable to reduce any CO2. So I thought it would be interesting to look at what's happening. So I log into the what's called the PJM website. PJM is Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. They are our regional transmission operator, and they are responsible for all the generation that's on the grid. And so early this morning, I picked this up. This was at 8:30 this morning. I wish I'd gotten up in the middle of the night and get a better reading. But at 8:30 in the morning, there was no solar on the system. Nuclear was producing the majority of the non-carbon, and everything else is almost in the margin, with the exception of wind. But again, if you look at fossil fuels, all right, you're looking at natural gas and coal, and those are the only two fossil fuels that are used in our grid network. So it was, if you call nuclear non-carbon, I didn't want to call it renewable, but 50% of our generation, all right, is in non-carbon, and 50% is in fossil fuels. Over in the lower right-hand corner, and something I'm really not going to talk about, but they have to make a forecast every day as to what that they think, all right, the needs of the people in our grid region need. And the actual generation is like driving a car to follow the path. And so literally there are people sitting in Baltimore and up in Pennsylvania who are dialing little dials, all right, to manage all this electricity that's going through our grid. I would like to go into that a little bit deeper, but that's for another time, for another talk. So then I logged in at noon, and wow, all right, we have ramped up, all right, we needed more power, but the share of non-carbon generation dropped. The fossil fuel increased. That is almost in line with what was happening in the Canary Islands. As the day goes on, and I did a quick look at 6 o'clock, all right, they're up to a total of 104,000 megawatts, and the share of the non-carbon producing, again, has dropped further for in the evening. If you look over to the right, where they're driving along the curve, the peak generation period is a little after 6 o'clock in the evening. So that kind of gives you a feel of the impact of what's our current grid and generation systems are doing. I just wanted to put these up here to capture that. What happened in the morning is no solar bumped up to 60%. But as the fossil fuels have increased, all right, the things that took a hit, all right, were basically wind. So we don't know whether the wind was blowing or not blowing at the time. I think the other, I'm not sure what other generation is, so I'll skip over that. The big surprise to me, all right, it should be to everybody else, is the only reason we have less of a non-carbon footprint is Calvert Cliffs fundamentally. And that is contributing overwhelmingly to our let's say not increasing the carbon, all right, in our area. As I pointed out in the original slide, four-fifths of every electron is fossil fuel. And here in the morning, we're looking at 50% of our electrons are coming from carbon sources, whereas it was only 20% for the national average. So I think we can pat ourselves a little bit on the back, even whether you want nuclear or not. It's definitely not contributing to CO2. The next slide shows the problem, though. All right. This is where the thing dropped, all right. And if you look at the bottom, you see there's a net increase in power. And if you look at that as a megawatt hour, they dumped 1,022 tons of CO2 in that hour, extra CO2 into the air. So even with a high mix of non-carbon, the way the grid operates, it relies on, all right, the fossil fuels, all right, to balance the grid. I just wanted to recapture that at the bottom there. You know, in the morning, in the morning we had more renewables or non-carbon, I should have put there, than we did midday, and more than we will have in the early evening. So, all right, what I found out was, all right, when I tried to install my system, they wouldn't let me install what I needed, all right, to meet my capacity. And the reason was that it would burn out my transformer. So if I wanted to pay for a new transformer, they were ready, willing, and able to go ahead, but that was several thousands of dollars, all right, that would have made the whole project not even cost effective. The second thing is the design was based on past weather data at Andrews, and what really kind of ends up striking me, as I've showed you, was the annual variability and hourly variability. All right, was a problem. Distribution, and I think in my next few graphs will make this a little bit more clear. As the power systems in residential solar systems are jumping all over the place, it's up to BG&E to make sure, all right, that the grid remains stable. So there's somebody up in Baltimore twiddling the dials all the time. What I didn't point out to you in one of the previous slides, and I wish I had, all right, when when the voltage drops or the frequency changes, if there's basically a 10% change, the BG&E has an hour to correct the situation. But if it pops outside of that window of 10%, literally jumps into seconds, and then that's where the grid begins to collapse. So it's absolutely critical for the generators and the distributors to maintain, all right, the voltage and frequency that's in the grid. And so they're constantly trying to look at these varying loads that they're trying to handle. And this is just a schematic of how it gets to you. And this is kind of the traditional thing. The electricity is generated at one point. It gets carried over the high voltage wires. It gets to BG&E, and they pass it out to us. And that's the way it's been ever since the late 1800s, and basically has not changed. But when you put solar down on the other end, you're kind of trying to run the system a little bit backwards, and that's what creates part of the problem. And the problem gets worse when we have high demand. When the demand goes up, there are customers who have agreed to pay basically 50% off on their electrical bill. They may get a call and say within 15 minutes your electricity is going to be shut off. And that's the first thing that BG&E does, all right, to control the grid. If not, then they have to go find other balancing sources, either from PJM or wherever, to balance the grid. So I guess in conclusion, did it meet my expectations? Well, hey, I made an economic decision to buy this. I hadn't looked at the details of what was going to happen. I purchased it to lock in the price of electricity. And that's really, so it was an economic decision on my part, I can't say that I had, well, probably in the back of my mind, I thought I was contributing to CO2 reduction. But I'm not so sure from what I've just told you that should be the reason. The production wasn't not as expected, but the unexpected economics of it is I've been able to sell several renewable energy credits, which has more than offset the cost of my lost production. In conclusion, however, I think I've shown you basically solar generation is really a real problem because of the variation, and it varies by hours, days, seasons. And that variability really requires the conventional generation to be in hot standby to accommodate the variability. I didn't really address how batteries will help, and then I guess that's really for a future discussion. They can help in terms of the hourly variation, but not much longer times. It turns out that Texas, during its particular problem, has one of the highest concentrations of battery storage in the United States. California has significantly more, but the batteries, of course, in that case just couldn't handle it because the emergency lasted more than a few hours. The other reason that batteries are really coming into the fore, and is that when you read the literature, marketing literature, all right, for the companies that are installing batteries and making batteries, they are arguing that from the utility point of view, they can make a lot of money through arbitrage. One of the things I didn't show you on the graphs up there was the spot price of electricity was on a couple of those graphs from PJM, and on some days, all right, a megawatt of power, which may sell for $10, can go up to $150 for a megawatt of power. So if you have a battery that you've paid $10 to put the electricity in, and can get $150 out of it, um, that's really what how the batteries are being sold to the utilities. In fact, Elon Musk in Australia made $19 million just by arbitrage of selling the electricity at the difference in price. Finally, I come down to it that unless we change the grid to handle, all right, the huge variability, the current structure and fuel mixes just are actually increasing CO2. And that's where, if we have to place emphasis on anything, if we have to talk to people where they should be focusing their efforts on, it should be on making the grid much more friendly to non-carbon sources. Let's put it that way.